Okay, and welcome back to Continue Freedom. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. If you're a returning guest, I want to thank you so much for coming back. I truly, truly appreciate it. So make sure that the 95 of you that are watching, 95% of you that are watching this video that are not subscribed, that you do the free thing. Just hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and you'll be notified every time a new video is released. Plus, it helps us with the algorithm, obviously. So we're going to start off by talking about, this effort by the Trump campaign to bring, a guy like Elon Musk on board and talk about the wasteful regulation and wasteful spending of the federal government. And this is actually a hilarious video. It's kind of it's funny but sad at the same time. Let's listen to Elon Musk. This is, by the way, the guy is giving away $1 million a day between now and election to a random person who has signed his petition. It's really quite extraordinary. But this is at one of his talks recently. He's been on a media tirade in support of Donald Trump. And let's listen to this. This is talking about government regulation.
Sort of nutty stories, some of them are, I guess, kind of funny. There's, we had to do this. SpaceX had to do the study to see if Starship would hit a shark. And I'm like, it's a big ocean, There's a lot of sharks. It's not impossible, but it's very unlikely. And said, well, you have to, this is, I think, from National Marine Fisheries, one of the, NIMF it's called. They were like, well, you have to do the study on whether you're going to hit a shark. We're like, what? And then we said, okay, fine, we'll do the analysis. And then, well, can you give us the shark data? They're like, no, we can't give you the shark data. We're like, okay, well, then we're in a bit of a quandary. How do we solve this this shark probability issue? And they said, well, we could give it to our Western division, but we don't trust them. And I'm like, am I in a comedy sketch here? And then, they're worried about the shark density data, like the people who hunt sharks for shark fins somehow getting their hands on this shark data. And so eventually, I think we got the data, and we could run the analysis to say, like, yeah, the sharks are going to be fine. But they wouldn't let us proceed with launch until we did this crazy shark data. And then we thought, okay, now we're done. And they said, but what about whales? I'm like, when you look at a picture of the Pacific, what percentage of the surface area of the Pacific do you see as whale? Because look at a picture, I don't see any. It's like, where's the whale? And honestly, if the ship did hit a whale, it's like, honestly, that whale had it coming, because it's like the odds are so low.
It was about this point where I thought, okay, is this a Netflix special or is this a political rally?
It's like Final Destination, the whale edition. It's like fate had it in for that whale,
Oh, man.
And so we had to do the whale analysis. And it's like, okay, yeah, the whales will be fine too, It goes on. And then there's like, well, what if the rocket goes underwater, then explodes, and then the whales have hearing damage? Like, this is real. This is actually, and we're like, look, if we could make a rocket go underwater and be a submarine, that would be like a feat of physics we could not accomplish, okay? This is not how it works. So anyway, just one crazy thing after another, where, so this is why I'm really feeling the pain of the overregulation.
Yes, and overregulation this isn't the only instance, by the way. I'm going to show you one other one. This isn't a video. It's just a couple of photos. But the government, everything that the government does is generally knee-jerk. It's far more than needs to be done, and it's all in the name of being completely and entirely risk-averse. But in case you didn't know, Starship is along with the Falcon Heavy. It's going to be the largest object, or is the largest object ever to be launched into space. It's monstrous. It's got something like 2 times the thrust of the Saturn V, which took people to the moon. But this is what they were required to do before they could launch. They had to kidnap a seal. They had to put headphones on it to find out if that seal was distressed by the sonic boom. Is that how we need to be spending time and resources? This is and there's burdens like this. These are regulatory burdens. This is what people talk about when they say regulatory burdens, and they are to such an excessive level that there's costs associated, obviously, with conducting these studies, and that cost is passed on to the consumer. Whether you're talking about silly studies that are done to for the agricultural industry or for the food industry or whatever it happens to be, some of these ridiculous studies that they do, the cost of it gets passed on to the consumer. And this is why this and many other reasons, but this is part of the reason that it costs 2 or 3 or 4 times as much to produce something in the U.S. than it does in other countries, because they don't require these silly little regulations. Now, excuse me, a senator who has been masterful at bringing things like this up is Rand Paul. And Rand Paul, I can give you a dozen different presentations. This is just a very short one of him explaining some of the silly spending that we have inside of the federal government.
Get so much grief over it. It's like, why do that? You're not balancing the budget over Big Bird. Take 1% of Big Bird's budget. Take 1% of everybody's budget. And what would that bring about? It would bring about more conservation of the dollar. It would bring about more restraint and more reform. I'll end with this. People say, where would you cut? I would say everywhere. But I can give you, on the tip of my hand, ridiculous stuff that should have 100% cut, but is never cut and goes on and on. In the early 1970s, William Proxmire, a conservative Democrat, pointed out that the National Science Foundation was spending $50,000 to study what makes people fall in love. Now, that's a better, I think, topic for Cosmopolitan magazine than it is for a government study. Nowadays, it's gone up. We spent $1 million having young people take selfies of themselves while smiling, and then looking at it later in the day to see if looking at pictures of yourself smiling makes you a happier person. That cost you $1 million. We spent $1.5 million studying the mating call of the Panamanian frog to see if the mating call of the country frogs was different than the city frogs. We spent nearly $1 million studying the Japanese quail to see if they're more sexually promiscuous when they're on cocaine. I think we could have just polled the audience on that one. This is the kind of ridiculous stuff, but does it get better? I complain about this every year and all the time, and everybody shakes their head and says, no way, why are we doing that? The National Science Foundation, we increased their budget 50% last year. People said, we have to compete with China, so let's give the National Science Foundation more money. We've almost increased our budget by 50%. The people are studying why you go on dates, why you're happy, why the male frogs, what their mating call is. This is the craziness.
And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of these things buried inside of these 2,000 long or page long bills that are getting pushed through Congress. It's ridiculous. And so we have to bring a bit of sanity and a bit of levity to this, right? Shrinking the federal government is the only logical course from this point forward. Finding agencies that are corrupt, finding agencies that are not performing. The Department of Education is a prime example. People whoop and holler and say, no, if Donald Trump closes down the Department of Education, then we're going to stop all public schools. That's not how it works. The Department of Education has continued to get more and more and more of our money to contribute more and more and more and more to our deficit and to our debt. And yet our test scores go down. They get worse, not better. Meanwhile, if you look at private schools or you look at charter schools, other solutions other than federally funded institutions, the test scores go up. Proficiency is up. It's so clearly, it's so clear right in front of us. And we have something to compare it to. Things run by the federal government are never better, always worse. 100% of the time, always worse. And so we can look at the people running our federal government and how they spend our taxpayer dollars, what they think of our taxpayer dollars. DOD is a perfect place to look. In the DOD, we were always told, when I was in the military, that we were told, be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And yet, when we pull out of a country that we had been fighting a war in for 25 years, this is what we decided to do. We left all of this military hardware to the enemy. To the enemy. Trump's famous phrase when he was talking about General Milley was he said when this guy said, "Sir, we need to leave the planes behind." And he's like, "Wait, you're telling me that it's cheaper to leave the plane behind than put a half a tank of gas in it and fly it over into Pakistan or somewhere else?" "Yes, sir." And he said, "That's when I knew this guy was an effing idiot," is the way how Donald Trump explained it. But this is what we did. We left. It's like good steward of taxpayer dollars, my butt. It's like, why was I such a good steward, or attempting to be such a good steward of taxpayer dollars? Meanwhile, the military leadership is doing this. This is cash, American cash, $100 bills. Look at this guy. He's ripping open $100 bills. Entire arms rooms full of weapons. M4 carbines, M9 pistols, 240 Bravos, 249s. All the good stuff and all the ammunition you could possibly get your hands on. It's like they think the money, they treat it like it grows on trees. So bringing some accountability to the federal government is not a bad thing. It is a good thing. And this is why they're fighting against Donald Trump. They're fighting against Donald Trump because he's the guy, again, as I've said repeatedly, he is outside of that system. He's outside of the choreographed lifestyle of the Kamala Harrises and the Joe Bidens and all that. I mean, the veil has been lifted on some of Joe Biden's background. If you listen to Judge Joe Brown, he'll explain to you the choreographed background of the Bushes, Clintons, and Obamas and all of that kind of stuff. But the veil was lifted a bit on Joe Biden, and now it's being lifted on Kamala Harris, that these people will make up whatever type of lifestyle they need to make up, hide any little thing, any inconvenient facts about their, about their life, about their actual life, who they actually are.
You are not even going to believe me. It is now official. Kamala faked the photo in her autobiography when she said, "This is my Grandma Beryl." She lied. Grandma Beryl was, in fact, a white Irish woman who owned a store on the island, and she used a fake photo, a real photo, a photo of an actual woman that was not her grandmother. We know this now officially because a Jamaican woman who was friends with her Grandma Beryl has stepped forward and confirmed that the photo is not Beryl.
Choreographed lifestyles, choreographed lives. You have to draw it out to fit inside of their identity politics bubble. Donald Trump doesn't have to do any of that because he's lived an insanely public life. For all of his good and all of his bad, everybody already knew everything about Donald Trump, but nobody knows anything about Kamala Harris. So they have to choreograph this, and they have to make her look like she's like a pop star, right? She's got to be the where was it? Oh, here it is. You got to get the celebrities to come on board. Pardon the language on this one, but this is Lizzo, right? You got to make Kamala look cool. So you got to get Lizzo out here to say stuff like this.
This is how a bad bitch saves democracy. You hoes couldn't even spell democracy. Ah!
There you go. Getting on a private plane. There you go. Lizzo. You got to have, because Kamala's cool, right? Pop culture. You got to get that involved. She's hip. Nobody liked her a year ago. Polled the lowest among any of the other Democrat candidates, but all you got to do is throw a little Lizzo, a little Usher, get all those people on board, choreograph her background, make her look primed and polished, ignore the fact that she married a guy who, cheated with a nanny, who beat up his ex-girlfriend, or his previous girlfriend. No. Tell her turn her into the one who's going to fix everything. This guy made a very eloquent statement, talking about with black people in particular, that, listen.
Do you agree with how she performed in that interview?
I believe that interview was a masterclass in why there is a statistically significant amount of black men who are tired of listening to the media and done entertaining the Democratic Party. You listen to Kamala Harris talk about a plan for black America. They've rolled out a plan for black America. My grandfather told me a very long time ago, never trust a man who promises to do tomorrow what they had the power to do yesterday.
There you go. She's losing, but they are trying so hard, dragging out Lizzo, dragging out Usher, bring out all the celebrities. Help choreograph what you're seeing. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris has been in office for 3.5 years, and we have seen the results of that. And, you know, when they can't get you with the identity politics, or they can't get you with, you know, the celebrities and all that stuff, well, then they just lie. So I said in my show yesterday that, I highlighted Kamala Harris saying that Donald Trump was exhausted. He looked exhausted, and he wasn't going to be able to make it. This is why he's canceling interviews. This is why he refuses to do another debate, because he's just suffering from exhaustion. Meanwhile, this is a very clever video done by somebody online where they did a 50x speed, starting both with the same start point of the rallies, and played it at 50 times speed. Kamala's is already over, by the way. So that's how fast they were playing it. This is Donald Trump, the exhausted guy, the guy who just doesn't have it in him anymore. Just can't cut it. He's tired. He can't do events. He can't do interviews. This is what they tell you. Can't do Kamala Harris is still been off the stage, never comes back on the stage. She's done. Donald Trump keeps going and going and going and going, and this goes on for it's like a 10-to-1 amount of time. He's up in front of the bright lights. He's talking to people. He's giving prepared remarks. He's doing some, ad-libbing like he normally does. This is the exhausted guy. This is the same day, by the way. Kamala Harris also said Donald Trump is exhausted, and yet he does hour and a half long podcasts, and she couldn't make it through a 20-minute interview with Bret Baier before her staff was saying, cut it off. So the reason I bring this up is that Donald Trump he has the platform of shrinking the federal government, of reducing regulation, of reducing wasteful spending. Now, he's not, the power of the purse still resides with the House, but there's a lot that he can influence inside of his own sphere as the executive when it comes to spending and wasteful spending and the bureaucracy. He can cut regulation. He has a lot of power now, which we can argue about whether that's right or wrong, but in this instance, it's a good thing. He can bring Elon Musk on board to get rid of some of the silliness inside of these federal agencies that are under the control of the executive. He can bring to light, because he's got one of the most powerful social media platforms in the world, he can bring to light a lot of this stuff and show it to the American people. Hey, look how they were wasting your taxpayer dollars. The things that the mainstream media will never cover, that Facebook will censor, that YouTube will censor. But it's disrupting this whole machine that is I will say that this is the Cloward-Piven strategy, right? And Cloward-Piven strategy means that you overwhelm a federal system until there's a collapse. And when there's a collapse, you can swoop in and exert even more extreme federal control and essentially gain entire total totalitarian control over a society. And this is what is happening by spending $34 trillion and continuing to spend more than we're bringing in. They're bringing our economy to the brink of collapse. And when we have an economic collapse, they will be the ones that are going to swoop in, take control over this federal government, institute their totalitarianism, and they can start managing what their overlords, people in the World Economic Forum and places like that, what they are ultimately wanting. They see ahead. They see the future. They know what the future is going to look like, and it's going to look something like this, as frightening as this is.
In the Industrial Revolution, we saw the creation of a new class of the urban proletariat, and much of the political and social history of the last 200 years involved what to do with this class and the new problems and opportunities. Now we see the creation of a new massive class of useless people. As computers...
Everybody laughed, but he wasn't laughing. He's being dead serious.
...come better and better in more and more fields, there is a distinct possibility that computers will outperform us in most tasks and will make humans redundant. And then the big political and economic question of the 21st century will be, what do we need humans for? Or at least, what do we need so many humans for?
Do you have an answer in the book?
At present, the best guess we have is keep them happy with drugs and computer games.
Okay, so they're already planning for the useless class of people. What to do with this useless class of people? The World Economic Forum has told us that you will own nothing and you will be happy. In order for them to manage this new world with an entire class of useless people, we've got to own everything. We've got to control everything. What did I say right after the hurricane? That the government's going to come in and try to swoop in and buy up people's property, generation-long properties. They say, look, Well, now we've heard it straight from the governor of North Carolina. Listen to him.
We work with them. We have plans for local governments. You know, in some areas, you just shouldn't build back. And we've been able to convince certain communities and people that buyouts are better. And
buyouts are better. Here they are. They're swooping in saying, look, you don't need to rebuild here. I know this is where we were going to have a lithium mine. That's a coincidence. It's now been destroyed. We'll buy it. We'll buy it from you for, 20 cents on the dollar, maybe 50, 60 cents on the dollar. We'll give you a little money for it. But these are land grabs. I watch this stuff all the time. That's usually where I lose people. They're like, okay, you're getting a little conspiratorial here now. But the evidence, when you watch it, it's laid out right in front of you. Taking over Bill Gates, the largest landowner in America now. Buying up farmland. What does Bill Gates say openly? That through vaccine technology, we can reduce world population. I'm going to have to go in and bleep that out because I said the V word. Dadgummit. That's more editing work for me. I was going to play this straight through. Population reduction. There's too many people. He just happens to be the guy who owns more farmland than anybody else in America. The federal government swooping in and buying up land. Monstrous plots of land. We saw it in the first COVID bill. They were paying farmers not to farm their land, not to grow crops. They called it erosion. It was erosion protection, I believe, saying plant or grow and maintain undergrowth rather than actual crops. Millions and millions of acres, by the way. And we'll pay you money. We'll give you money, but don't raise crops. It was in an actual federal bill. There's just so much more nefarious stuff behind the scenes, and this is why Donald Trump is being attacked, because he's not in this deep state machine that exists in the U.S. right now. He's not in this deep state machine that is it's already. I mean, they already control most of Europe. I mean, that's authoritarianism to the nth degree in Europe. But America is the one that really has to be weakened. America is the one that's going to see the most drastic change over the course of the next 4 to 10 years. And Donald Trump he is right in their crosshairs because he's the one who's disrupting their plan. He's disrupting the long-term goals of the deep state and of the World Economic Forum because he didn't buy into that crap. And they have to, as Cloward Piven, through the Cloward Piven strategy, they have got to continue spending too much, regulating too much, making it impossible to do business in America, not allowing us to go back to an actual production economy, but leaving us as a consumer economy, because that is far easier to disrupt. It's easier to poison the people. It's easier to keep the people compliant. And Donald Trump is saying, nope, we're going to start building again. We're going to start becoming an actual productive society here in America. And they can't have that. All right, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below. We're on X Locals, Rumble, and YouTube, and I will see you in the next video. God bless you, and God bless America.